What's up, guys? Welcome in to the Week 4 rankings.
Week 4 rankings. Yeah, that's the fourth ranking, but it's technically week 13 is what we call them. I don't know. I don't keep track of stuff.
Math is hard. Very hard. I'm Chris Marler, joined by good buddy Connor O'Gara. We are here reacting to, I feel like, not the craziest night, obviously. Like, I don't think it was anything that was super shocking by any means, but, let alone another playoff ranking released by the College Football Playoff Committee right going into rivalry week. I thought we were going to get some craziness last week, and you and I have both been on the same page of this, saying that this was never going to be the 2007 season, but it's kind of, as the season's gone on, been further and further less, I guess, than it could have been remotely been 2007 season. What was your reaction to just the initial week that was, and then also the new rankings?
Yeah. Look, I think we've all been waiting on that chaotic weekend. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
The real shakeup and the fact that look at that top 8. You see that right there at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
Nobody has left that top 8 in the playoff rankings. That has held true this entire time. And so if you're looking at that thinking, oh, well, that's the sign that, this is where we just have this isn't really exciting. I would actually push back and say that means that we're about to get some craziness at the top. But yeah, Washington, Florida State, that's the significance of where we're at right now. And I think that seeing Washington get bumped to 4 ahead of Florida State, a lot of people are going to look at that and think that it's because, Florida State lost Jordan Travis. And I think it's way more about Washington having that win at Oregon State. What was your takeaway from saying that?
Right. So I thought like two things could be true at the same time, and that's that Washington deserves to be ranked higher than Florida State right now, and the other is that Florida State, I think, like, if they win their games, I still think they're going to get in. I just don't think that we're going to see this doomsday scenario where it's going to be like, well, you know what, Florida State barely beat Florida, or they barely beat this team. They're missing a starting quarterback. In this era, like in this actual college football playoff era, this is year 10. You go back to year 1, and one of the best stories in college football history that we just don't talk about is the fact that Ohio State went into the postseason with a third-string quarterback, boat race Wisconsin, I think it was, and beat Bama, and then beat Oregon. So it's like, I think that you've already got a precedence where, like, a quarterback. And I think if you've gone 13 games unbeaten, you deserve to be in for Washington and Florida State. So I just think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, you're kind of breaking up there. I wasn't able to get some of that.
That's fair.
I mean, I think we're saying the same thing. If you are prematurely dropping Florida State and you're saying that this team won't get in undefeated, and that was the conversation on College Game Day before the Jordan Travis injury with Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard, who, my God, if there's somebody with more leeway with his job than Desmond Howard, I have not seen it. But the conversation surrounding that is stupid. A 13-0 Power 5 champ who challenged itself in non-conference play with 2 SEC teams in that non-conference schedule. To me, that would just be absolutely ridiculous if Florida State somehow got left out at 13-0. I don't care who their quarterback is. What you just said is the point that matters. We have already seen a situation like that in the very first edition of the 14 playoff, in which a quarterback gets knocked out, regular season finale, and then boom, don't you know it, QB3 is what Cardale Jones was. We're not here to play school. Comes in and sets the world on fire in ways that we will never forget in college football. And you as a Bama fan will certainly never forget it either. But I think that – yeah, sorry, my bad. But yeah, look, I think that's what is going to be interesting moving forward. Like Washington getting that love, though. Can we talk about this for a second? Because it felt like the selection committee was playing both sides, because they moved Washington up to 4, but then dropped Oregon State 5 spots. And McElroy brought up that point. What was your take on that?
I thought it was interesting because Oregon State, I think, is a really good team. I was kind of shocked that they did drop 5 spots. They lost by 2 points, right?
Yeah, it's by 2 points at home to a Washington team that obviously is undefeated.
Right, and they also have their other loss. I understand the Washington State loss. You could say they lost by 3 points on the road. That game was a little bit not as close as maybe the score would insinuate, because they pulled away, or they pulled back in that game late. But like, you have a loss against Arizona, and you have a loss against Washington. Maybe you should be behind Arizona, but I was kind of shocked they dropped them that drastically when you lost to who you're saying is the number 4 team in the country. You're saying this team is in, right? Like, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this team looks so unimpressive. Like, in a 2-point loss in the rain at home, I don't know about all that.
Yeah, I didn't really get that. But then you bring up the point about Arizona. It's like, well, you got to rank Oregon State behind Arizona because Arizona beat them a few weeks ago, and that
Yeah,
was, that they're both 3-loss teams sitting there. The Oregon thing is getting more ridiculous. It is, and I'll
it
say it so
is.
you don't have to. Look, I I just tweeted this. If you're going to tell me that Oregon continues to pass the eye test, and that's why they deserve to be the top ranked one-loss team, then let's simply evaluate playoff contenders based on how they perform against teams with at least 4 losses. Because that's what you're telling me. You're not telling me that they have looked the part against quality competition, because their best win is against a 4-loss team. And by the
Right.
way, that 4-loss team, Utah, is no longer in the top 25. USC is no longer in the top 25. Bama has beat not one, not two, but 3 teams in the top 25. I get it. You can't rank Bama ahead of Texas. Okay, Texas. Texas beat 2 teams that are currently in the playoff top
Right.
25 as well. So if you want to tell me, oh, but it's eye test, they've just looked dominant start to finish. All right, so let's just look at 4-loss teams. Let's not look at anything else. Tennessee shouldn't be ranked. Tennessee is
No.
somehow ranked. Bama came back and ended up winning that game, and winning that game convincingly. So I guess that's the 4-loss team that we're judging against. And beating the likes of LSU and Ole Miss doesn't matter for Bama. I don't really understand that whole argument. Like, Michigan is getting knocked for that, right? Michigan is being ranked behind Ohio State and behind Georgia because it doesn't have that resume. Its resume
Right.
is Penn State and nothing else. And meanwhile, Oregon is continuing to get that love because why? They have passed the
Yeah.
eye test against a bunch of teams that are solid but not great.
When you look at it too, like, Washington has the resume. If you want to look at like ranked wins at the time of playing them, they have 4 ranked wins, right? Like, I mean, that's an impressive resume for a conference that has been left out of the college football playoff a whole bunch because the resume never seems to match up. What you're saying about Michigan makes a ton of sense, because the thing with Michigan, it's like, we've sat here all along. These are the best. These are the 3 best teams. These are the 3 best teams: Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and we've all just kind of bought into it. And it's like this it's like a confirmation bias that's being held in play every single week, and it doesn't make any sense, because it's almost like it goes into tiers where it's like, all right, well, those 3 teams they're set until one of them loses. Then we're going to change up how we rank the rest of them based off not eye test for all of them, but some of them for sure. Florida State, we're going to drop because of the resume and their quarterback. Washington moves up because of a ranked win. But I think everything you just said is, if Oregon was a Big Ten team, I would be losing my mind right now. I would be losing if this was Penn State. Like, they have 1 loss, and you're like, what? Like, I will say it over and over and over again. Now until 8 p.m. on December 2nd, if Bama wins against Georgia, Texas deserves to be in over Bama if they get in. I don't think it's like a nightmare scenario. All these like crazy things that can happen with, like, if there's all these 1-loss teams. I don't think that's how it's going to play out. But in the meantime, this whole Oregon thing, you're right. Like, this is crazy that we're like, like any other team, the first thing we do, Michigan, like you said, well, they only played this team. I've done it repeatedly all year. But with Oregon, it's like, did you see what Bo Nix did against Arizona State? Okay. Like, the whole schedule's been bad.
And for those saying, by the way, this is a different conversation to say, like, the Heisman conversation compared to Jaden Daniels. And if your argument is, well, Jaden Daniels hasn't had to face anyone, I'd strongly disagree. And I'd say, look, LSU is possibly going to finish with 4 opponents who are going to New Year's Six bowls. So that argument falls very, very flat to me.
Right.
That's if Ole Miss can get into that top 11, which is what they would need to be able to do. Ironic that Tulane would potentially be knocking out Ole Miss of a New Year's Six spot. Nobody really wants to talk about New Year's Six spots and all that. But the thing that I find frustrating, and I usually am the person saying, you're paying too much attention to this. This is the metric that I don't think the selection cares about as much as you do. The quality of loss is being weighed heavily heavily in ways that I don't really like. Like,
Yeah.
that's why Oregon is getting this love. That's why Louisville is sitting there at number 10. It did not move ahead of Mizzou. I thought they were actually going to move ahead of Mizzou this time. Louisville has 6 wins against Power 5 teams with winning records. That is the most of any playoff contender.
Wow.
But you wouldn't know that because obviously they're still at that number 10 spot. They have a virtually non-existent path to the playoff if you actually think about
Yeah.
what would have to happen, the fact that Jordan Travis is out. So they're not even going to get credit really if they win the ACC championship. And that's the thing that's kind of hurting them in a weird way. But yeah, it's that point to me is just kind of frustrating to think about because I usually felt like the selection committee hasn't looked at that as much as people have thought.
No, I completely agree with that. I think it's weird because I think this year more than ever, I think in week 1, you're always the calm one when you're like in general with us, but it's like, everything's going to play out. Everything will play out. And I kept thinking that too. And I was like, yeah, everything will play out. This will all be fine. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, the argument they keep making is Bama, Texas. And I don't think it's the right argument because there's other spots in this whole thing now. Like, I'm glad Tennessee still ranks miraculously because it helps out Bama's resume. But like, the argument I heard made for Tennessee was, well, they have 3 of those 4 losses are against teams that are in the top 10. Okay, well, they lost by 28 at home. They lost by 14 to Bama, and they lost by 29 to Mizzou. Okay. Like, I don't – what is the point you're trying to make? So, I think that looking at those teams, you're right about Louisville. And it's still just weird. We've been doing this for 4 weeks, Connor. And I'm not saying this is a Bama fan. I'm just saying it's so bizarre to watch those 2 logos, Texas and Bama, not move at all with the seasons they're having is just it's just so weird to me. And I don't think it's right or wrong either way. I'm just saying I think it's just very bizarre. So I know my internet's a little bit spotty. There isn't that much crazy stuff going on. Well, hopefully this upcoming week we'll have a lot more to talk about with the rivalry week stuff and then obviously the championship game. But we'll close it out, man. I appreciate you joining me each week. But what do you think? Who do you have as your top 4 as of today? And tell me why I ever put Georgia not in my top 4 that one time.
Wait a minute. Oh, so fine. What my final 4? I'm sticking with the same thing. I'm sticking with the same thing. You already know. If you've watched this, I'm still sticking with Georgia, Ohio State. I'm going to continue to bang the drum that Florida State is going to get in as a 13-0 team. I think they win these next 2. And then I think Washington is able to get in, but as a 1-loss team because Oregon will lose outright this weekend to Oregon State. That was my lock of the week, although I'm getting 13.5 with Oregon State. So it's not really like, I'm going with the spread there, but yeah, sorry.
Oregon State's a 13.5-point underdog this week.
I better not have gotten that wrong on the pod. I need to look this up right now to make sure that I'm right. So
I mean, that's a crazy spread for a team that's beaten them 2 out of the last 3 times they've played.
But think about it. It's in Eugene. Like this has been okay. Well, Oregon is that good. They are that team. Yeah, Oregon's a 13.5-point favorite. That is absolutely insane for an Oregon State team that their 3 losses, Marler, are by a combined 8 points.
Yeah,
like that is it. And I think they could do a lot of things to actually counteract what Oregon does extremely well at the line of scrimmage. So yeah, I agree that line is surprising. But I'm going to stay with my original pick until there's something that suggests that it won't happen. Because even the Florida State thing, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, they could beat Kentucky. They could beat Florida, and then they could beat Louisville in the ACC championship.
I'll give you mine. I'm actually gonna ask you one more question. We'll get out of here, but I'll say I like Georgia at 1. I like Ohio State at 2. I would love for Bama to get in. I just don't think it's gonna happen. I do think that Florida State actually loses to Louisville in that SC or ACC championship. I think they lose 1 of the 2 in their last 2 games. Because I think I was very surprised to see. I know they have a backup quarterback. But they're playing against a backup quarterback in Florida, and they're a 7-point favorite. I was surprised that the line was that low. So that'll be interesting. I will say that Washington gets in, and then I'll say that Texas jumps in as well.
Did you just name 5 teams?
No, please God, tell me I didn't do that. Did I? No,
I don't know.
Georgia, Ohio State, Washington, and Texas.
Okay, you're good. You're good.
You made me doubt it for a second. I was like, I will tell you this too. I think that Louisville can beat Florida State, even though I saw Louisville, struggle in like that abandoned haunted house and just a spirit Halloween store over there in Miami against the Hurricanes. I think that we haven't seen a Mark Stoops upset this year, like a staple Mark Stoops, like one win on the season. It's like, that's a big win. That's a good win that he had. I think they might have a chance. They're only a 7-point underdog as well in that game. Give me your biggest upset you think that would happen this week. You said Oregon State earlier, but give me another one you think could shake up everything here.
Yeah, I think Oregon State beating Oregon would shake up
Yeah,
everything because that would open the door for Washington in theory. If they were 12-1 and Oregon could miss out on the Pac-12 championship because if Arizona
yeah,
wins and then Oregon loses, that would open the door and then Oregon's just done. And so
right.
that opens the door for Washington. That opens the door for some of these like a potential Georgia, like if Georgia were to lose in the
Yeah,
SEC championship, that kind of creates that path that's not really there right now. I mean, it's just kind of not. Like last year, we're talking about the Big Ten getting 2 teams in because it just kind of played out that way, and there was enough chaos for the
yeah,
loser of that Michigan Ohio State game to be able to get in. I'm looking at it now, going like, man, unless we get a significant upset, it just doesn't feel like that's going to happen at
yeah.
this point. I guess Ohio State beating Michigan, that doesn't really shake anything up though. Like there's no
Right.
world in which I'm sitting here going, Iowa's going to win the Big Ten championship or something like that. I mean, first to 10 points would probably be the only way they could do that. But I just think that the shakeup that's coming is probably going to be from the Pac-12. Like it just
Yeah.
always is. And in the first time in 9 years, first time since year 1 of the playoff poll in which all 5 Power 5 conferences have gone into rivalry week with a legitimate path to the
Yeah.
playoff. I think we're going to get some chaos this weekend. We just have to. We're overdue for it.
I just pray on all things holy that it doesn't involve anything in Jordan Hare Stadium. It would be nice to just enjoy my Thanksgiving, ease on into the holidays, and prepare for the ass whooping that's going to await Bama when they play Georgia and Atlanta. So, but I will again say this, Connor, there's one thing I know. It is, I will say from now until 8 p.m. on December 2nd, Texas should be in Bama. But
Okay.
if they somehow don't, if Bama somehow beats Georgia, that next 16 hours, I'm going to be a nightmare.
What about if Bama loses to Auburn? You got to rank New Mexico State ahead of Bama.
They should. I mean, they like Bama. They lost by 21, Connor. They lost by 21. All right, let me get out of here before the service gets somehow even worse. I appreciate you joining me each week. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving with the fam. First Thanksgiving for the daughter, so that'll be a lot of fun. I hope she gets all the Hawaiian rolls. You guys seemingly have already recorded, right? So tell everyone where the pods are out, and we'll get at you next week.
Yeah, Wednesday. Appreciate that. Wednesday morning. It's new pod is dropping. Good friend Peter Burns. The shun has been lifted after a 1.5-year hiatus, which featured one ghost texting on his part. That was totally his fault. No, we are. We'll be live and we'll be previewing every rivalry week game. Tons and tons of stuff to be able to talk about. It's a fun time of year, man.
Yeah, man, for sure. All right, guys. Well, we will see you next week. And Connor, I'll see you then.